Hi everyone, and welcome to another story time with Miss Leah. It is Wednesday, April 15th, and we are going to be continuing our story about the boxcar children at about 3 o'clock. But before we get started, we're going to have our little pre-show where I show you something from nature and I read some poetry. So I wonder if you guys have gotten out. Have you been walking and looking outdoors? We went on a walk this morning and my ears were super cold because even though the sun, I can feel the warmth and it gives me hope that the warm weather is coming. But the wind must have been coming right from the north because my ears were hurting. They were so cold I should have worn my hat when I went out on my walk. But I was able to find another one of my favorites. This is probably my daughter Lucy's favorite. So I'm going to show that to you. We have one of these in our yard, but all the branches are so high that it's hard for us to get you a sample. This is from a dogwood tree. Now, dogwood trees bloom in this pretty reddish pink color, or there's some that are white that have a bit of a greenish tint. And we actually have one of each in our yard. And these look like flowers. Most people would think that those are flowers. Would you think? If you saw this tree, oh, look at the pretty pink flowers on that tree. But guess what? This is one of nature's tricks because these are actually not a flower. If you want to find the dogwood flower, you have to look inside these pretty pink petals, and there are tiny greenish yellow colored circles, little dots, and each one of those is actually a flower. And those are the flower of the dogwood tree. So you might be asking, then what are the things that look like flowers? Well, they are called bracts. B-R-A-C-T-S, I think. Bracts. And they are, like I said, not a flower, just actually they come out of what's called the leaf scar. Inside the twig during the winter, when we think the trees look kind of dead and barren, God has placed everything that tree needs to bloom and to produce fruit for the next year. And it's all hidden inside what is called the leaf scar. And so when it's spring and the warm weather comes and the sap starts running through the tree, then those start to bloom. And what comes out of that first for the dogwood tree are these bracts, and they kind of protect that flower. And then they will go away and the leaves will come. So it's all part of, again, spring. Now, I mentioned that this was Lucy's favorite, and I want to tell you a little bit about why this is her favorite. So I am Lucy's teacher, and so every once in a while I have them do a study about something that they can observe day after day as it grows and as it changes. And so one time she had picked the dogwood tree. And so she would go out and she'd observe the dogwood tree for every day for a couple months. And every day she'd come back and she would say, there's nothing different. There's nothing different. And then all of a sudden she'd start to notice that the buds were getting bigger. And then very slowly, and then they were getting bigger, but there's still no flowers, no bracts coming out. And all the other trees were blooming. The maple tree had come, and the oak tree had come, and the other tree, the daffodils were up, and the tulips were up, and still no dogwood blooms because they like to take their time. And finally they came, and she was so excited. And let me tell you that she can spot a dogwood tree in every season. She can tell in the winter that it's a dogwood tree, in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall, because she has a relationship with this tree because she observed it so closely. So when we practice our observation skills in nature and we get to know what God has created, it changes us. It helps us to have like a friendship with some of the things that we might find around our houses, or in the woods, or in places that we might visit. And when you have that special relationship with something in nature, it makes it even more important to you. And then it makes you even want to spend more time outside. Well, I have a couple of poems. One is about a tree, and the other one is about some cats. So I thought I would read them out. Here's the first one. It is called Here's to Thee, and there's no author given. Here's to thee, old apple tree. Stand fast, root. Bear well, top. Pray God send us a Yuling crop. Every twig, apple big. Every bough, apple now. Hats full, caps full, fill quarter sacks full. Holla, boys, holla, huzzah. There's a picture of the apple tree. And if you look close in this picture, you can see a little girl, and there's a bunch of cats that are coming to her. And on her blanket, she has a tea party set up. So our next poem is called The Cats Have Come to Tea. Have you ever had a tea party? Did a bunch of cats come to your tea party? Well, this little girl is planning a tea party, and guess who's coming? The cats have come to tea. What did she see? Oh, what did she see? As she stood leaning against the tree, why, all the cats had come to tea. What a fine turnout from round about. All the houses had let them out, and here they were with scamper and shout. Meow, 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 was all they could say. And we hope to find you well today. Oh, what would she do? What should she do? What a lot of milk they would get through. For here they were with meow, meow, meow. She did not know, oh, she did not know, if bread and butter they'd like or no. They might want little mice, oh, oh, oh. Dear me, oh, dear me, all the cats have come to tea. That poem is by Kate Greenaway. Well, in our book that we've been reading this week called The Boxcar Children, we have so far found out that there are 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and their parents have died, and they've run away from home because they're a little bit afraid of their grandfather, whom they've never met. But they ran away, and they found a boxcar, which is an old train car, in the woods. And we've learned a little bit about these hard-working children, that they have found all that they've needed. They've gotten some money, and they bought some bread, and one of the boys has gotten a job, and he's been mowing grasses, and he's gotten them some milk and some other food that they need. And in the woods, they found a trash heap where they found some dishes and some other items, and they've made a shelf, and they are taking care of themselves in the woods. So today we're going to find out what will happen next with our 4 siblings that are out in the woods, lost but having a good time together. Chapter 7. A Big Meal from Little Onions. The next morning, Jessie and Henry talked about the strange noise. Oh yeah, remember, they heard a noise in the middle of the night. They did not tell Violet and Benny. What do you think it was? Asked Jessie. Do you think it was a rabbit? I don't know, said Henry, but I think someone was in the woods. I am glad we were not hurt. Someone must have stepped on a stick and made it crack. Well, what should we do? Asked Jessie. Nothing, said Henry. Watch is a good watchdog. He loves us now, and if anyone tried to hurt us, Watch would take care of us. He would do more than growl. But after this, we must not let Benny go into the woods alone. I'll keep Benny and Violet with me all the time, said Jessie. Good, said Henry, and keep Watch with you all the time, too. Good morning, Benny. Time to get up. Today you must build something for me out of stones. What is it? Asked Benny eagerly. I'm not going to tell you, said Henry, laughing. You built it just as Jessie tells you, and you will see. Henry was so eager to begin work that he ran all the way to town. The doctor came to the door and smilingly looked him over from head to foot. My mother will tell you what to do today, the doctor said. She wants you to work in her garden. Mrs. Moore, the doctor's mother, had a sweet face and looked very kind. Good morning, Henry, she said. Do you know how to thin out vegetables? Oh, yes, said Henry. I like to work in a vegetable garden. I haven't much time to take care of my garden, Mrs. Moore said. There, see that? She pulled out a carrot. It had come out, for it was much too near the other carrots. Yes, I see, said Henry. And he began to thin out the carrots. Mrs. Moore watched him as he pulled out some of the little carrots and put them in a pile. He left the other carrots to grow. Then he began on the turnips. You're a good worker, said Mrs. Moore. I can see that. She smiled at Henry. You may thin out all these vegetables. Then she went into the house and left Henry alone. He worked all the morning. He thinned out the carrots, the turnips, and the little onions. The mill bells rang at noon, but Henry did not hear them. He still worked on in the hot sun. Then he saw Mrs. Moore looking at him. You've worked long enough now, she said. You may come again this afternoon. What shall I do with the vegetables I pulled up? Henry asked. Oh, I don't want them, said Mrs. Moore. Just leave them in a pile. Do you mind if I take them? Asked Henry. No, indeed. Do you have chickens? Then, without waiting for an answer, she went right on. You have done good work. Here is $1. Henry said thank you, and was glad he did not have to answer about the chickens. When Mrs. Moore went into the house, he took some of the little carrots and turnips and onions. If he had looked up, he would have seen Mrs. Moore in the window watching him, but he did not look up. He was too eager to get to the store and order some meat. When he arrived at the boxcar, Benny told him, the building is done. I helped with it. The building was a fireplace made of flat stones. Benny did a lot of the work, said Jessie. He carried stones and found wood for the fire. The fireplace was a very good one. The children in watch had made a hole in the foot of a big rock between two trees. Flat stones were laid on the floor of this hole and around the sides. More big stones were put up to keep out the wind. Jessie had found a heavy wire in the dump and had put the big kettle on it and tied the ends of the wire to the 2 trees. The kettle hung over the fireplace and the fire was laid. Beside the fireplace was a big wood pile. Fine! Fine, cried Henry. You have done well. Now see what I have. The girls were delighted with the meat and the little vegetables. With Henry's knife, they cut the meat into little pieces. Then they filled the kettle with water from the fountain and put the meat into it with a tin plate for a cover. Henry started the fire and it burned well at once. Jessie cut the tops off the vegetables and washed them in the brook. I'll put them in after the meat has cooked a while, she said. Soon the water began to boil, and the stew began to smell very good. Watch sat down and looked at it. He sniffed hungrily at it and barked and barked. The children sat around the fireplace, eating bread and milk. Now and then Jessie stirred the stew with a big spoon. It will make a good meal, said Henry. Keep it boiling and do not leave it. When I come home tonight, I'll bring you some salt. And whatever you do, don't get on fire. Violet pointed to the pitcher and teapot that she had filled with water. That's to put on Benny or Watch if he should get on fire, she said. Henry laughed and went happily on his way. He wished he could stay and smell the stew boiling, but he thought he ought to go to work. So he went back to Dr. Moore's house. He was very happy when Dr. Moore said, Do you want to clean out the garage? The garage was not in very good order. Dr. Moore laughed when he saw Henry look around for a broom. I must go out now, said Dr. Moore. You just cleaned this place up. So Henry began at once. First he opened all the boxes. On the biggest box he painted the word tools with a long-handled brush and a can of paint he had found. On another box he painted nails. Then he picked over the things and put the tools in the toolbox and the nails in the nail box. This was fun for Henry because he liked to get things in order. Henry found a lot of nails that were bent and covered with rust. He put them in his pocket. I'll ask the doctor for these bent nails, he said to himself. They are no good to him, but they are fine for me. I can use every old nail I get. Then he washed the floor and washed his paintbrush. When Dr. Moore came home, he found Henry putting brushes, paint cans, and other things on the shelf. My, he cried. He looked at the garage and laughed and laughed. He laughed until his mother came out to see what he was laughing at. Look, Mother, he said. Look at those tools and look at that shelf. Look at my hammers. 1, 2, 3, 4 hammers. Your hammer, my hammer, and the 2 other hammers. They were all lost. Could you use a hammer, Henry? Well, yes, indeed I can, cried Henry. Why don't you take one, said Dr. Moore. You found them all. Oh, thank you, said Henry. He showed the doctor the bent nails and was told that he could have those too. He could hardly wait now to start home, because he was so eager to show Benny and his sisters his new hammer and his nails. Tomorrow will be Sunday, said Dr. Moore. Will you come again the next day? Oh, yes, replied Henry, who had lost all track of the days. The cherries must be picked, said the doctor. He looked at Henry in a strange way. We could use any number of cherry pickers if they were all as careful as you. Could you? Asked Henry eagerly. Well, I'll come. So the three said goodbye, and Henry started for home. He had another $1, a pocket full of old nails, a hammer, and the pile of vegetables that he had left at noon. On the way home, he bought some salt. When he arrived at the boxcar, he began to smell a delicious smell. Onions, he shouted, running up to the kettle. I do like the smell of onions. I like the turnips best, said Violet. Jessie took off the cover carefully and stirred in the salt, and Henry sniffed the brown stew. It was boiling and boiling. A ladle of all good things, cried Henry. Where did you get it? I found a tin cup in the dump, said Jessie. We used a long stick for a handle and tied it to the cup with a piece of wire. It makes a fine ladle. She ladled out the stew onto plates and bowls and put the spoon in each one. Oh, said Benny, I'm so hungry. I must eat my supper. The meat was well cooked and the vegetables were delicious. Violet passed her plate for more turnips. I'd like some more onions, said Henry. All the children ate until they could eat no more. That was the best meal I ever ate, said Jessie. Me too, said Violet. I have time tonight to make Benny's cart, remarked Henry. We'll want a cart. Will you make it with my wheels? Asked Benny. Yes, with your wheels, answered Henry. But you must cart stones in it when I get it done. Yes, said Benny, I will cart stones or rocks or anything. Tomorrow will be Sunday, and I can stay at home, Henry went on. Do you think it's all right, Jessie, to build the dam for the swimming pool on Sunday? Yes, I do, said Jessie. We are making the swimming pool so that we can keep clean. Henry began happily to hammer out the bent nails with his new hammer, and soon he had some good nails. You and I will go and find some boards, Benny, he said. Come on. So the boys came back with some boards from the dump. Henry sat down and began to make the cart. He could not see very well because it was getting dark, and there was no moon. But at last the cart was done, and he gave it to Benny. Thank you, said Benny politely. After his sisters had admired the cart, Benny put it around just for fun. Then Henry put it in the boxcar for the night. Henry said to Jessie, I hope we do not hear that noise tonight. I hope not, too, said Jessie. Then she laughed. Look at Benny, she said. He's gone to sleep with his hand on the cart. Henry laughed too, but he laughed at himself because he was going to sleep with his new hammer under his pillow. A swimming pool at last. The boxcar children were so tired that they slept until 10 o'clock Sunday morning. When they woke up at last, they hurried through breakfast and went to work on the swimming pool. We'll make a dam across the brook, said Henry. Here's my cart, said Benny. I'll cart stones and logs in it. Good for you, laughed Henry. First, the 4 children went down the brook to look at the pool Jessie had seen. The water was quiet here, and there was clean sand all around the little pool. It's big enough for a swimming pool, Henry remarked, but I don't think it's deep enough. He put a long stick in it to see how deep it was. When he looked at the wet stick, he found that the water was about a foot deep. The swimming pool should be 3 times as deep, he said. Then it will be deep enough to swim in and won't be too deep for Benny. We'll build the dam here with logs and stones. While the other children started the dam, Jessie washed all their stockings. We won't want our stockings on while we are working in the brook, she remarked, as she rinsed them and hung them on the clothesline to dry. So this is a good time to wash them. It was hard work building the dam, but the children liked hard work. Henry and Jessie pulled the logs to the brook, and Violet and Benny carried the stones with the help of the cart. Now and then Henry was called on to help with the heavy stones, but the two younger children carried most of them. "Splash the stones right into the water," Henry told them, "but be careful to keep them in a line between these two trees." The children watched with delighted eyes as the wall of stones under the water began to grow higher and higher. "The rock wall will help to hold the logs in place," said Henry. At last it was time to lay the logs across the brook. "Let's lay the first ones between these two trees," said Jessie. "Then the trees will hold both ends of the logs." "Good work," cried Henry, much pleased. "That's just what we'll do." But when the first big log was splashed into place on top of the stone wall, the water began to run over the top of the log and around both ends. "Oh dear," cried Jessie, "the water runs around the ends every time. What shall we do?" "We'll have to put lots of logs on with brush between them," said Henry. "We'll put on so many that the water can't get through." They laid 3 logs across with 3 more on top of them and 3 more on top of those. Violet filled her arms with brush and held it in place until each log was laid. Benny filled the holes at the ends of the logs with flat stones. Such wet children never were seen before, but the hot sun would dry them off, and no one cared. When the 3 top logs were laid in place at last, the 4 tired children sat down to watch the pool fill. But Henry could not sit still as the water came higher and higher up the dam. "See how deep the pool is getting," he cried. "See how still it is." At last the pool was full, and the water came over the top of the dam and made another waterfall. "Just like the mill dam," said Henry. "Now the pool is deep enough for all of us to swim in." "You boys can have the first swim," said Jessie. "We girls must go and get dinner ready. We'll ring the bell when we are ready." The boys splashed around in the pool while the girls made a fire and hung the kettle of brown stew over it, stirring it now and then. Violet cut the bread and then got the butter, hard and cold, out of the refrigerator. When everything was ready, Jessie rang the dinner bell. This bell was only a tin can from the dump. Jessie had hung it on a tree with a string, and she rang it with a spoon. Then she got the ladle and began ladling out the stew. "That's the dinner bell," said Benny. "I know it is. Come, Watch. Don't you want some dinner?" Watch had had a swim too. He came out of the water and shook himself. The 2 boys put on their dry clothes and went to Sunday dinner. "Let me ring the bell again," said Benny. "I like stew even better today," said Henry, eating hungrily. "That's because we worked so hard," remarked Jessie. "Let's go for a walk in the woods this afternoon." "Oh, let's," said Violet. "Let's go exploring again." The children washed the dishes and then started on their walk. As they went along, Watch began to bark. At first, the explorers were frightened. "Oh, what is it?" cried Violet. "Maybe it's a rabbit," said Henry. Then they saw a hen running away. Through the woods. Watch ran after her, but Henry called him back. "Don't run after that poor hen," he said. "The hen had a nest," remarked Benny. "What?" asked Jessie. "She had some eggs in it," said Benny. "Come here and see." Jessie looked on the ground where Benny was pointing and saw a nest with 5 eggs in it. "A runaway hen," said Jessie. She wanted to hide her nest so she would have some chickens. "We'll have the eggs for supper. I know how to cook eggs." The eggs made a delicious supper. Jessie put them in a bowl with a little salt, and Violet took a spoon and stirred them as hard as she could. "Put in a little milk, Violet," said Jessie, "and stir them some more." Henry started up the fire. The big kettle was hung over the fire, and Jessie put in some butter. She watched the butter until it was nice and brown, and then she put in the eggs. "Sit down," she said. "Be all ready to eat when the eggs are done." So Violet put the blue tablecloth on the ground. She got the bread and the butter and the plates and the spoon, and the children sat ready for their supper. "Here I come," cried Jessie. "Hold out your plates." "Oh, Jessie," cried Benny, "this is the best meal I ever ate. I found the eggs and you cooked them." "Yes, you did, Benny," said Henry. "Thank you for a fine meal." "Tomorrow we'll have to eat bread and milk," said Jessie. But when tomorrow came, the children had more than bread and milk, as you will soon see. All right, and that is where we're going to end for today. So tomorrow you have to come and find out what else the children will have to eat. These children are some of the luckiest children I've ever heard about. They are hardworking, and it seems like they are being provided for, everything that they need. So we'll find out what happens to the boxcar children, and we'll finish the book tomorrow and Friday. You guys have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.